The lawyer read Mom's will, and I finally understood my place in the family. The lawyer read my mother's will in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee. By the time he reached the fourth paragraph, I finally understood something about my family that had taken me 41 years to learn. My name was not there. Not in the house, not in the savings, not in the small gifts, not even beside my father's tools, the only thing in that entire room I had ever wanted. My sister Diane got the money. My brother Kevin got the tools. Diane's daughter, who had visited my mother maybe twice during the final years, got my mother's car for when she was old enough to drive. And me? I got nothing. Not $1, not one object, not one note, not one sentence saying thank you for the 3 years I had given my mother the spare room in my house. 3 years of waking up at 4 in the morning. 3 years of medication charts taped inside the kitchen cabinet. 3 years of missed vacations, delayed plans, drained savings, ruined sleep, and my wife quietly doing the kind of care my own siblings only posted about. Diane looked at me across the fake wood table and said, "Marcus, you understand, right?" Kevin stared down at his hands. The lawyer kept his eyes on the page, and I remember looking at that will, at the empty space where my name should have been, and feeling something I did not expect. Not shock, not even anger, relief. Because that document had finally said out loud what my family had been saying quietly my whole life. Marcus can handle it. Marcus won't mind. Marcus doesn't need anything. Marcus is not someone we provide for. Marcus is the person we use to provide for everyone else. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why a missing name could feel like freedom, you have to understand how long I had been waiting for my name to appear. My name is Marcus. I was the middle child of 3, born between my older sister Diane and my younger brother Kevin. From as early as I can remember, the 3 of us had assigned roles in our family. Nobody announced them. Nobody sat us down and explained them. But everybody understood them, the way you understand the layout of the house you grew up in. Diane was the bright one. She was my mother's right hand. The responsible daughter. The one whose report cards went on the refrigerator and stayed there long after the paper curled at the corners and the tape turned yellow. Diane was the one my mother bragged about at church, at family parties, in grocery store aisles, anywhere someone would stand still long enough to listen. Kevin was the baby, the soft one, the charming one, the one everyone forgave before he even finished apologizing. If Kevin broke something, it was because he was sensitive. If Kevin quit something, it was because the world was too hard on him. If Kevin needed money, it was because he was going through a hard time. And me? I was the one who could handle things. That phrase followed me my entire life. Marcus can handle it. Marcus is good with that stuff. Marcus won't mind. Ask Marcus. At first, it sounded like praise. When you are a child, you don't know the difference between being trusted and being used. You don't know that a compliment can be a hook. You just know that someone has looked at you and decided you are useful, and if attention is rare enough, usefulness can feel almost like love. My mother, Eleanor, was not a monster. I need to say that clearly, because if I make her into one, I make the story simpler than it really was. She baked. She remembered birthdays. She knew how everybody took their coffee. She could make a person feel, for the length of one phone call, like they were the only person in the world she truly wanted to talk to. That was part of what made everything so confusing. The people who used me also loved me, in their way. And for most of my life, I could not separate those two things. I thought being needed and being loved were the same thing. I thought if I made myself necessary enough, love would eventually have no choice but to follow. It took me until I was 41 years old, sitting in a lawyer's office above a nail salon, listening to my name fail to appear in my mother's will, to understand that necessity is not love. You can be necessary to people who would never think to protect you. You can be the first person they call when something breaks, and still not be someone they imagine having a future. The first time I remember understanding my place was small and ordinary. Maybe that is why it stayed with me. The big things blur. The small things have edges. I was 9. We were at the old kitchen table, the yellow Formica one with a cigarette burn near the corner. Diane had a science project due the next morning. One of those papier-mâché volcanoes every family seems to produce at least once. She had left it until the night before. The paste would not dry. The whole thing was sagging in on itself like something exhausted. Diane was crying at the table. Kevin was on the floor in front of the television, watching cartoons with the volume too loud. My mother looked across the kitchen under the humming fluorescent light and said, "Marcus, you're good with your hands. Come help your sister." It was not a question. There was no room inside the sentence for me to say no. Diane did not even look up when I came over. She just slid the project toward me the way you slide a problem toward the person whose job is problems. I worked on that volcano for hours. I reshaped it with my small hands. I mixed baking soda and food coloring. I fixed the crater. I cleaned paste from the table after Diane fell asleep on the couch, with blue television light flickering across her face. The next week, she got an A. The volcano went on the refrigerator with her name written across the top in her own bubbly handwriting. A few days later, I heard my mother tell our neighbor Mrs. Petrakis over the back fence, "Diane has such a talent for science. You should have seen what she made." I was standing right there in the yard. I heard every word. And here is the part that explains the next 30 years of my life better than anything else I could tell you. I was not angry. I felt warm. That sounds strange now, even to me. But I had done something useful, and usefulness was the closest thing to love I knew how to recognize. I told myself the praise secretly belonged to both of us. Diane's name was on the paper, but I knew the truth. I had helped. More than helped. I had made it work. That secret felt like a little treasure I could hold privately. I thought, next time, they will remember. Next time, they will say my name. They did not. But I kept waiting. That is the part I wish I could explain to people who ask why I stayed inside that family role for so long. You keep waiting because the alternative is too cold. You keep waiting because the child inside you keeps believing that if you do one more good thing, one more helpful thing, one more generous thing, surely this will be the thing that makes them look up and say your name. The pattern set early and deep. When Kevin broke the Hendersons' window playing ball where he was not supposed to, I was the one sent 2 houses down to apologize. I raked their leaves every weekend that fall to work off the cost of the glass. Kevin was too young to understand the value of things. Diane was too busy with school. Marcus could handle it. Mrs. Henderson was kind to me. She brought me hot cider in October and told me I was a responsible young man. The kindness felt strange, almost suspicious. A stranger thanked me more honestly than my family did. When my father needed someone to hand him tools in the garage while he worked on the truck or the lawnmower, it was me. Those were some of the only good hours of my childhood, just the 2 of us in the smell of motor oil and sawdust, not talking much. With him, being useful almost felt like being chosen. He would hold out his hand without looking, and I would know whether he wanted the wrench or the pliers. He would nod once if I got it right. That nod meant more to me than it should have. My father was quiet, not cruel. He was the kind of man who disappeared slowly into work, into the garage, into whatever broken thing he could understand better than people. I loved those hours with him because they were simple. Something was broken. He needed a tool. I handed it to him. It made sense. Then he died when I was 19. Heart attack. In that same garage, on a Saturday morning, with a wrench still in his hand. I was the one who found him. I want to say that quickly because even now, years later, I cannot say it slowly. I found him. I called the ambulance. I stood in the driveway while the neighbors came out and pretended not to stare. In the weeks that followed, I handled the arrangements my mother was too shattered to handle. Diane came home from college briefly. Kevin was 15 and was protected from almost everything. At the funeral, a relative I barely knew put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're the man of the house now, son. Your mother's going to need you." I swallowed that sentence whole. The man of the house. The one your mother needs. It lived inside me for decades. After my father died, the household tilted harder in the direction it had already been leaning, and everything slid toward me. Money worries, the leaking roof, my mother's loneliness, Kevin's trouble, the small daily labor of keeping a family from falling apart. I stood there and braced, because that was what the man of the house did, because Marcus could handle it. I had gotten a real job at 16, and after my father died, my paychecks somehow always helped with groceries. Money was always tight. There was never enough for everything. But somehow, there had been money for Diane's college. Money scraped, borrowed, prioritized. Later, there was money for Kevin's 2 attempts at community college, and money again after he withdrew because Kevin needed another chance. There was never a college conversation for me. It simply was not discussed. You don't ask whether the foundation wants to go to college. The foundation holds up the house. That is its purpose. By the time I was 20, I had stopped expecting things and started expecting only to be asked. That was how my family's attention came to me. Through requests. Can you fix this? Can you cover that? Can you drive there? Can you talk to him? Can you handle it? The ask meant I existed. The ask meant I was in the room. Years passed that all rhymed with each other. Different jobs, different apartments, same family, same role. Then I met Renata. She is my wife. And I think she was the first person in my entire life who saw the way my family treated me and named it before I could. Renata grew up in a loud family. They argued openly. They forgave openly. They said what they meant badly, sometimes, but at least they said it. They did not keep silent ledgers and call them love. The first time she came to a family dinner at my mother's house, I watched her watching us. I saw her notice the choreography. She saw my mother's voice change pitch before asking me to look at the garbage disposal. She saw Diane talk over me when I mentioned being promoted to shift lead at the warehouse, covering my small good news with a story about her daughter's dance recital. She saw Kevin arrive 40 minutes late, eat the most food, and leave with a plate of leftovers and $40 from my mother's purse while everyone pretended not to see the transaction. On the drive home, Renata was quiet. The highway was dark, the dashboard lights low and green. After a while, she said, "Marcus, can I ask you something? And you don't have to get upset." I said, "Okay," already getting a little upset. She said, "Do they ever ask you anything?" "What do you mean?" "About you," she said. "Your job? What you want? How you're doing? Anything?" I started defending them on instinct. That is what you do when someone touches the bruise you have been calling normal your whole life. I said they were just tired. I said we were not a talky family. I said they loved me in their own way. Then I tried to think of one recent example. One time my mother had asked me how I was, and waited for the answer. One time Diane had shown interest in my life without needing something. One time Kevin had called me just to hear my voice. I could not find one. The silence in the car answered Renata more honestly than I could. She reached over and put her hand on the back of my neck. She did not say, "I told you so." She did not say anything else. That was the first time I saw the edge of the truth. But I still backed away from it. Because seeing something and being ready to live differently are not the same thing. The thing about being the family fixer is that the requests escalate so slowly you never feel the exact moment when it becomes unreasonable. Cover a bill this once, drive across town, take a Saturday, co-sign one thing, have mom stay for a while. Each request, standing alone, looks like the kind of thing a decent person would do for family. It is only years later, when you lay all of it flat in your mind like documents on a table, that you see the shape of the whole. The first large ask came when I was 36. Diane and her husband Greg were buying a house in a nice neighborhood with good schools. The deal was about to fall through because they were $8,000 short on the down payment. My mother called me. I still remember her voice. Warm, sweet, full of sugar. She asked how Renata was, which she almost never did. She asked how work was treating me, which she never did. I felt that little flicker of hope I always felt when the attention turned toward me. Then she got to it. Your sister's in a real bind, honey. And you've always been so good with money, so sensible. Not like the rest of us. We knew you'd understand. We knew you'd understand. I thought about that phrase for weeks. The we. The new. As if my answer had been decided before I was even told there was a question. As if some meeting of the real family had already happened somewhere without me, and my role was simply to be informed of what I would do. Renata and I had $11,000 in savings. It was the beginning of our own down payment. 3 years of cheap meals, skipped vacations, extra shifts, and cars we should have replaced, but did not. That money was not just money. It was a future. A small house, a porch, maybe, a kitchen with enough room for 2 people to stand in it without turning sideways. That night, I lay awake beside Renata. I thought she was asleep. Then she said into the dark, "It's your money, Marcus. Your call. I mean that. But I want you to notice they didn't call Kevin. He's their child too. They didn't even consider him." I said, "Kevin doesn't have anything. You know that." She said, "That is not my point, and you know it." She was right. Her point was not whether Kevin could help. Her point was who they reached for. Her point was that their hand went automatically to the same drawer. I heard her. I did not yet know how to listen. I wrote the check the next morning. $8,000. Almost everything we had. Everyone called it a loan. My mother used the word loan. Diane used the word loan. Greg shook my hand and said they would make it right as soon as they could. My mother hugged me and said, "You're saving the day, Marcus. You always come through. You always come through." I held on to that sentence for weeks. It felt like being seen. And because I was starving for that feeling, I let it be worth $8,000. They never paid it back. Not 8,000, not 800, not 80. 2 years later, when Renata and I were trying again to save for a house, I mentioned it gently to Diane. I almost apologized for bringing it up. "No rush," I said. "But is there any chance some of that could come back this year? We're looking at houses again." Diane looked at me as if I had said something rude. "Why are you keeping score, Marcus? We're family. We don't keep score. That's so unlike you." Then she told me about the teak patio furniture they had just bought for the backyard. A whole set. Teak. "It'll last forever," she said. My mother, sitting right there, changed the subject to Kevin and a new job that was finally going to turn everything around for him. The loan dissolved into the family atmosphere. No one announced that it was no longer a loan. It just became rude to remember that it had ever been one. In my family, money flowed one way. The only crime was noticing. And I let it dissolve. I want to be honest about my own part. They built the cage, but for a long time I kept the door locked from the inside. Because inside the cage I was still good old reliable Marcus. Outside, I did not know who I would be. Kevin was where I lost the most. Not only money, something harder to name. He had a gift for failing upward through affection. He was charming, truly charming. The kind of person who could walk into a tense room and have everyone laughing in 5 minutes. When Kevin's attention landed on you, it felt like sunshine because it was warm and rare and clearly optional. He just could not hold a job, a promise, a dollar, or a plan longer than the enthusiasm that began it. Every time he fell, the family had a system for catching him. The system was me. I was the net under the trapeze. I don't think Kevin ever worried about falling because somewhere in him, deep down, he knew there would always be Marcus. When I was 38, Kevin called at 11 at night. That was always how it started with him. The late call. The tremor in the voice. He owed money to a man he would not name. Gambling money. The number scared me when he said it. He was crying. Real crying. Under everything, he was still my little brother. The boy whose bike I had held upright in the church parking lot because our father was always in the garage. The boy I had protected even when no one asked me to. So I drove across town at midnight. I gave him the cash I had in the house. 3 weeks later, I co-signed a loan that was supposed to consolidate all his debts and finally get him on his feet. My mother arranged it. She orchestrated it. She pushed it across the finish line and made it sound like an act of love. She sat across from me at her kitchen table, held my hand, and said, "You're the responsible one, Marcus. That's why it has to be you. The bank trusts you. You've got good credit. Kevin needs his big brother right now." The sweetness in her voice was thick enough to lie down in. So I signed. Of course I signed. I had been signing my whole life. I just had not always known there was a pen in my hand. Kevin made 4 payments. 4. Then he stopped. No announcement. No apology. The lender called me because my name was on the loan. My credit was on the line. Mine was the only name in the situation that the world outside our family treated like a responsibility. I covered it quietly for a while. I did not even tell Renata at first. That is one of the things I am least proud of. I hid statements. I paid Kevin's debt out of our grocery budget and our maybe someday house budget. Renata found one of the statements folded in a drawer. We had the worst fight of our marriage. It was not really about the money. She was crying, which she almost never did. She said, "When is it your turn, Marcus? When does somebody pour into you for once?" I genuinely did not understand the question. My turn for what? In my family, there were no turns. There was no line in which I would eventually arrive at the front. There was only a drain in the corner of the room, and everything flowed toward it. I was the drain. The question made no sense inside the architecture of my life. That loan cost me $11,000 over the next 2 years. It damaged my credit. It delayed the house Renata and I wanted by another 4 years. And during that same stretch, while I ate packed sandwiches in the warehouse break room to save money, Kevin took a trip to Mexico with friends. He posted pictures. I saw them on my phone while sitting on a cheap folding chair under a flickering light, eating a sandwich Renata had packed because we were saving every dollar. There he was on a beach with a drink in his hand and the ocean behind him. A few days later, my mother said how good it was to see Kevin finally relaxing. He deserved a break, she said. He deserved a break. I felt something then that was not clean anger. It was vertigo, the feeling of looking down and realizing the floor had never been where you thought it was. Still, I did not stop. People who have not lived inside a family role want there to be a snapping point. A bright, clean moment where the quiet person finally wakes up and walks away forever. It was not like that for me. Not when family had taught me what love was supposed to look like before I had any other reference. There were 1,000 small moments, At each one, I chose them over myself again, because the alternative was too cold to hold. The third thing, the thing that pressed hardest and revealed the most, was my mother's care. She got sick when she was 68. At first, it was forgetfulness she laughed off. Then a fall she blamed on a rug. Then another fall that broke her wrist. Then a diagnosis with a long name that meant she could not safely live alone anymore. There was a family meeting at Diane's house, the nice house, the one I had helped buy. We sat in Diane's living room, Diane and Greg, Kevin, me, and Renata slightly behind me, the way she always was at these things, present, but not fully counted. Everyone agreed quickly, with great emotion, that Mom could not go into a facility. That would be abandoning her. That was not who we were. Family takes care of family. There were tears. Diane talked about how much Mom had given us. Kevin nodded gravely, which was easier than offering anything. Then there was a pause. In that pause, everyone turned and looked at me, not at each other, at me. Before a word was spoken, I understood what had already been decided. Diane said it gently, reasonably, each point so sensible by itself that objecting to the whole thing would have made me sound selfish. You don't have kids, Marcus, so your evenings and weekends are freer. She said it softly, like it was just a fact. And your schedule at the warehouse is more flexible than mine, with the girls in school and all their activities. And Renata works from home, so there would already be someone in the house during the day. It just makes the most sense. You don't have kids. As if that were a spare room. As if the quiet grief at the center of my marriage were unused capacity the family had decided to put to work. Renata and I had wanted children. We had tried. We had doctors and tests and months where we did not speak much, because hope had become too fragile to touch directly. And in one sentence, Diane turned that private grief into logistics. You don't have kids. I felt Renata go still beside me. I said yes. I want to be fair to myself. I did not say yes only out of weakness. I loved my mother. Underneath every layer of resentment, exhaustion, and old hunger, I did love her. The thought of her frightened and confused among strangers was unbearable to me. In a way it apparently was not to Diane, who could reject a facility without really picturing our mother in one. And there was something else. Something harder to admit. Being the one who could handle it had become so woven into who I was, that part of me reached for the role even while another part of me dreaded it. The role was the only chair in the family with my name on it. Refusing it would have meant standing up from the only seat I had ever been given. So my mother moved into our spare room. The room Renata and I had once imagined as a nursery. For 3 years, Renata and I cared for her. I want you to understand what 3 years means. The words go by quickly. The years did not. 3 years means waking at 4 in the morning because your mother is confused and frightened and calling a name you do not recognize. It means learning the difference between pain, panic, confusion, hunger, and memory loss by the sound of a voice through a wall. It means a medication chart taped inside the kitchen cabinet. A pill organizer the size of a brick. Sheets washed at midnight. A hallway nightlight that never turns off. It means your house slowly begins to smell like medicine and things nobody says politely. It means your supervisor pulling you aside after you rearrange shifts too many times and asking, not unkindly, whether everything is okay at home. It means burning through vacation days one by one until there are none left. It means 3 years where Renata and I never went away, never had a weekend that belonged fully to us, never made plans without first building a backup plan around my mother's needs. And it means Renata, who owed my mother nothing, doing the most difficult work with a tenderness my own siblings never saw. Renata sat with her on the long, gray afternoons, She held her hand when the fear came. She read to her. She sang to her. She did intimate care without complaint for a woman who had never once made her feel fully welcome in the family. And on my mother's clearer days, she would look past Renata and ask, "When is Diane coming?" Or, "Has Kevin called?" Sometimes she asked, "Where are my real children?" My real children. Renata never told me those words hurt her. She did not have to. I saw it in the way she turned toward the sink and became very busy with dishes that were already clean. Diane visited maybe once a month, usually on a Sunday, usually for an hour. She would arrive with flowers, kiss Mom on the forehead, arrange the room a little, and take photos of herself holding my mother's hand near the window where the light was nice. Later, she posted them online, cherishing every precious moment. So blessed to still have my mother. Family is everything. People commented that she was a devoted daughter. What a beautiful family. Your mother is so lucky to have children who care so much. I would see those posts at night after a 14-hour day of warehouse work and care, my back aching in a place that started hurting that year and never stopped. The photos were not exactly fake. That was what made them so hard to hate. Diane did love our mother. She just loved her in a way that could be photographed. We loved her in the hours no one would ever see. Kevin visited less than Diane. When he did, he stayed 20 minutes and left with something. A power drill that had belonged to our father. $40 Renata pressed into his hand, mostly to make him leave faster. A plate of food wrapped in foil. My mother lit up for them every time. Her face changed. She became younger, brighter. The golden children arrived like sunshine, and they got the warm part of her. We got the 4 in the morning. We got the fear. We got the long gray afternoons. We got, "Where are my real children?" Near the end of the second year, Renata's father had a stroke 2 states away. It was sudden. It was bad. She needed to go to him, and she needed me to go with her. For once in my life, I needed to be a husband first instead of a son. I called Diane. I asked her to take Mom for 3 days. Just 3 days. I had the medications written down, everything labeled. I would make it as easy as humanly possible. Diane said no, not cruelly. Cruel would have been easier to hate. She said it warmly, apologetically, in the full family voice. "Oh, Marcus, I just don't see how I can right now. The girls have so much going on and Greg is away for work. You know how Mom gets in a strange environment. She gets so agitated. She is so settled with you. And honestly, sweetheart, you are just so much better at this than I am. You are just so much better at this than I am." There it was. The oldest trap in my family, dressed as a compliment. My competence at carrying the impossible thing was offered as the reason I should never be allowed to put it down. Not even for 3 days. Not even to stand beside my wife while her father fought for his life. I called Kevin. He did not pick up. 4 hours later, he texted, "Man, I wish I could, but you know my situation." I stared at that text for a long time. I did not know his situation. No one ever knew Kevin's situation. It was a permanent fog that followed him around and excused him from every adult obligation. Renata went to her father alone. I drove her to the airport at 5 in the morning. I watched her go through security and turn back to give me a small but brave wave. Then I drove home in the dark to my mother asleep down the hall and a half-empty cup of coffee going cold in front of me. The only light in the kitchen was the green clock on the stove. That night, I finally let myself think the sentence all the way through. They will take everything I give, and they will never give anything back. Not because they are evil, because in their understanding of this family, there is nothing to give back. I am not a person with needs. I am the resource the family draws from. You do not repay a resource. You do not visit the well. You do not ask the floor how it is holding up. I still did not do anything. Understanding a thing and becoming free of it are separated by a distance you cross slowly, on foot, alone. But the sentence was in the room with me now. It sat at the kitchen table, like a third person. And once a true thing sits down in your house, you can pretend not to see it, but you cannot make it leave. My mother died in the spring, when I was 41. It was peaceful at the end. Renata was there. I was there, holding my mother's hand, which by then felt like bones and paper. Diane and Kevin were not there. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, and Tuesday afternoons were not their visiting times. There was no dramatic warning, just a quiet slipping away over the course of an hour. I told her I loved her, which was true. I did not tell her any of the other things, which were also true. You don't, at the end. You let the kindest true thing be the only one you say. At the funeral, Diane gave the eulogy. She had asked to, and nobody argued. She stood at the front of the church in a beautiful dark dress, composed and lovely, and spoke about my mother with real grace, the meals, the wisdom, the unconditional love, the way Mom could light up a room. Then Diane said that the family had come together in Mom's final years to care for her at home, that they had all made sacrifices, that it had not been easy, but love had carried them through it together. The family had come together. They had all made sacrifices. People nodded. People dabbed their eyes. After the service, relatives came up to Diane and told her how strong she had been. What a good daughter. How hard it must have been caring for her mother all that time. Not one person in that church knew that the meals Diane described had been cooked in my kitchen, by my wife, hundreds of times. Not one person knew about 4 a.m. Not one person knew whose vacation days had paid for 3 impossible years. Diane, I believe, was not lying on purpose. The family had a story about itself, and inside that story, burdens were shared, love carried everyone, and Diane had been devoted. I had become so invisible inside my own labor that the woman who had not lifted one corner of the weight could stand up and describe carrying it, and cry real tears while doing so. I considered correcting her. For one hot second, standing at the back of the church in a suit that had gotten too tight over the years when I stopped having time to care for myself, I imagined standing up and telling everyone the truth. But it was my mother's funeral, and underneath that, if I am honest, some small, starving 9-year-old part of me still believed that if I remained dignified enough, if I stayed the good one, if I did not make a scene, then maybe someone would finally notice. So I let Diane have it. Renata stood beside me and held my hand so hard it hurt. I knew without looking at her that she was holding herself in place, physically holding herself back from telling that beautiful, weeping room exactly how those meals had been made. 2 weeks after the funeral, the lawyer called us all to his office for the reading of the will. The night before the reading, Diane called me. She used the voice my mother had taught her. Soft, careful, already full of expectation. "Marcus," she said, "tomorrow might be emotional. I just want us to remember that Mom wanted peace." I said nothing. She continued, "And you know Kevin is still unstable. If things are uneven, I hope you won't take it personally. Mom probably just wanted to make sure the people who needed help got help." The people who needed help. I was standing in my kitchen when she said it. The medication chart was still taped inside the cabinet because I had not yet had the heart to take it down. The chair where Renata had sat with my mother through long afternoons was still by the window. There were still bills on the table, still bedding to wash, still a room down the hall that smelled faintly like illness and lavender soap. And Diane was preparing me to be gracious about disappearing. I said, "I won't make a scene, Diane." She exhaled, relieved. She thought I was promising to understand them. I was really promising myself something else. I was promising that I would not beg to be seen. The next day, Mr. Halverson's office was on the second floor of a strip mall above a nail salon. The conference room had a long, fake wood table and mismatched chairs gathered from different rooms over different years, some upholstered, some not. In the corner, a coffee pot had been left on the burner too long, and the smell of burnt coffee hung over the whole proceeding. To this day, if I smell coffee scorched in a pot, I am back in that room. Diane was there with Greg. She was dressed carefully, with a composed expectancy about her. Kevin was on time for the first time I could remember in years. He wore a pressed, button-down shirt I had never seen before, the kind of shirt a man buys when he expects to receive good news and wants to look worthy of it. Renata sat beside me. The lawyer, Mr. Halverson, was an older man with reading glasses and the tired patience of someone who had read many wills to many families and had seen what those documents did to people. He shuffled papers. He cleared his throat. I want to tell you what I was thinking before he began, because it is the most exposed I will make myself in this story. I was not thinking about money. I had never coveted my mother's money, what little there was, the modest proceeds from her downsized house, and her small savings. What I was hoping for was smaller, more pathetic, more human. A line, a note. Some formal legal place where what I had done would finally be written down. People put things in wills. Sometimes they leave letters. Sometimes they leave acknowledgments. Sometimes, when they cannot say something in life, they leave it in a document, where it cannot be interrupted or softened or taken back. Maybe my mother, who could never say it to my face, had written it somewhere safe. Maybe there would be one sentence. Marcus took care of me. Marcus gave more than anyone knew. Marcus mattered. That was what I hoped for, at 41 years old. I hoped for my name. Mr. Halverson began. He read the legal language first. Sound mind, final wishes, the formal phrases that make grief sound dry. Then he came to the estate. The house was to be sold. The proceeds, together with the contents of her savings accounts, were to be divided. I leaned forward without deciding to. The proceeds were to be divided equally between her daughter Diane and her son Kevin. Equally. Between Diane and Kevin. My name was not in that sentence. I waited for him to correct it. For him to keep reading and add the third name. The way you wait for a stair you are sure must be there, and your foot reaches down through empty air. He kept reading. There were specific bequests. My mother's jewelry, all of it, to Diane. My father's tools to Kevin. The tools. The tools I had handed my father one by one in the garage as a boy. The tools that still carried, in my mind, the smell of sawdust and motor oil. The only inheritance from my father I had ever wanted. They went to Kevin, who had never held a wrench except to borrow our father's drill and never return it. My mother's car went to Diane's oldest daughter, for when she got her license. A small cash gift went to the church. Mr. Halverson read all the way to the end. Every clause, every line. And my name never appeared. Not as a beneficiary, not as a recipient of one object, not in a note, not in a line of thanks, not even as a son. Reading it the way a stranger would, it was as if my mother had two children. And there it was, the last name on the page. It was not mine. In that exact moment, in the smell of burnt coffee, I understood my place in the family. Not as a feeling this time. Not as another ache to swallow. As a fact. Notarized. Witnessed. Drafted by an attorney and read aloud by a man with no reason to soften it. I was not someone you provide for. I had never been. An heir is someone whose future you imagine, someone you picture going on without you, someone you want to protect after you are gone. I had not been that to my mother. I was something else. I was the instrument by which the heirs were provided for. I was how the children got taken care of. You do not leave money to the machine. You do not write a thank you note to the floor. You leave the money to the people the machine exists to serve, and the machine, having no needs of its own, is simply not mentioned. I waited for grief to hit me like a wave. It did not. Not in the way I expected. What came instead was stillness, a wide, strange quiet. It felt almost physical, like setting down a weight you have carried for so long that you forgot it was a weight, that you mistook it for the natural feeling of having a body. I did not feel lighter right away. I felt confused by the absence of pain. Diane spoke first. She was already half rising, gathering her purse from the back of her chair. "Well," she said, "that all seems pretty clear." Then she looked at me. To her credit, or maybe just to her discomfort, something flickered across her face, some small awareness of the empty space where my name should have been. "Marcus," she said, "you understand, right? I mean, you and Renata are doing okay. You're stable. You don't have kids to worry about leaving anything to. Mom probably just figured you didn't need it, not the way Kevin does. You know how Kevin is. You know how Kevin is." The oldest sentence in our family. The sentence that had paid for a beach in Mexico. The sentence that had excused 4 payments on a loan. The sentence that had swallowed my down payment, my credit, my time, my sleep, and 3 decades of my life. I looked at Diane. I looked at Kevin, who at least had the grace to stare down at the table. I waited for the old reflex to rise, the urge to smooth everything over, to say, "It's fine. Of course I understand. Don't worry about me." I reached for that reflex the way your hand reaches for a railing in the dark. It was not there. Somewhere between the 3rd paragraph and the 4th, it had let go of me. Or I had let go of it. I still do not know which. I did not make a speech. People like stories where the quiet person finally says the perfect, devastating thing. Real life rarely gives you that. There was no speech in me. I just said, in a normal voice, "You're right. I don't need it." Diane did not understand what I meant. She thought I meant the money. I did not. What I meant was that I no longer needed the thing I had actually walked into that room hoping for. I had walked in hoping, one last time, to be seen. The will had answered that hope completely. There was nothing left to wait for. The thing I had been waiting for since I was 9 years old, building a volcano under a buzzing kitchen light, was officially, legally, finally, not coming. And the end of waiting, even when what you learn is terrible, is its own strange mercy. Because you get back all the energy you spent on the waiting. All of it. At once. Renata drove us home. I remember the quiet of that drive in painful detail. The late spring light came low through the windshield. The long shadows of telephone poles moved across the hood. She kept glancing over at me at stoplights, checking whether I was about to brake. Halfway home, she reached over and put her hand on my knee. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," she said. I said, "Don't be." And I meant it. I said, "I think I finally understand the rules of the game I've been losing my whole life." She asked after a moment, "What are the rules?" I watched ordinary houses pass by, each one with ordinary lives inside. "The rule is that I give and they get," I said, "and it was decided so long ago that nobody even thinks of it as a rule anymore. It's just gravity to them." Renata said nothing. I said, "The only way to win a game like that is to stop playing." She took her hand off my knee and laced her fingers with mine on the gear shift. We drove the rest of the way home without talking. The light went from gold to gray to the blue of early evening. It was, I think, the most peaceful drive of my life. In a different kind of story, I would have done something dramatic next. I would have called a family meeting and exposed Diane's eulogy. I would have produced a ledger of every unpaid loan. I would have sent a scorched letter. I would have cut everyone off with a perfect sentence and watched them finally understand. I did none of that. What I did was much quieter and much harder. I stopped. No announcement. No speech. No line in the sand drawn loudly enough for everyone to gather around and argue over. I simply stopped being available for the role. I stopped reading silences as instructions. I stopped volunteering. I stopped filling every pause with an offer. The first real test came about a month later. The house was still being prepared for sale. The inheritance had not yet been distributed. Kevin was short on rent. He called at 10 o'clock at night. That was always how Kevin's emergencies arrived. Late. With a tremor in the voice. "Hey man," he said. "I hate to ask, I really do, but you know my situation. You're the only one who can help me right now, just until the house money comes through. I'll pay you back the second it does, I swear. You're the only one who can help." For 30 years that sentence had been a key that opened a lock inside me. I sat at my kitchen table with the phone against my ear. Renata stood in the doorway watching me. I felt the automatic yes rise in my throat. For the first time, I did not grab it. I let it rise. I let it pass. "I'm not able to help with that, Kevin," I said. There was a stunned pause. He had never heard those words from me, not once. Then he worked through the playbook. Hurt first. "How can you say that to me?" Then family. "We're brothers, man." Then blood. Blood is blood. Then the voice he learned from our mother, sweet and pleading. "You know I'd do it for you, Marcus." To each one, I said some version of the same thing. "I hear you. I know you're in a tough spot. I'm not able to help with that." I did not bring up the loan. I did not bring up the 4 payments. I did not bring up Mexico. I did not bring up the drill. I had finally understood that keeping score out loud was just another way of staying in the game. Another way of remaining owed. Another way of keeping a rope tied between us. I declined, gently and without drama, to be the floor he fell onto one more time. He hung up angry. Afterward, my hands shook. The adrenaline was real. But underneath the shaking was that same wide stillness. The set down the weight stillness. I was starting to know its name. Freedom. Diane was harder. Diane did not usually make direct asks. She worked through guilt, image, atmosphere. She would call and mention how worried she was about Kevin, how he was really struggling, how sad it all was. Then she would let the silence sit. The long, expectant silence. The silence I had filled my entire life. I stopped filling it. I let Diane's silence belong to Diane. At first, she seemed confused, then irritated. Something in the machinery had changed, and she did not know how to name it. She would bring up family gatherings and talk about how important it was that we all stay close for Mom's sake. For Mom's sake meant resume your position. Come back. Be useful. The family does not work correctly with you standing outside it. I went to 1 or 2 gatherings that year, and there I noticed something I had carefully avoided seeing for 41 years. When I was not fixing, funding, hosting, carrying, or handling, I had almost no role there. The conversation moved around me like water around a stone. Diane and Greg and Kevin had their references, their rhythms, their inside jokes. I was not in them. Maybe I had never been. I had always assumed I was quiet at family gatherings because I was tired. It turned out that stripped of my usefulness, with nothing being asked of me, I was nearly invisible. A piece of furniture that had wandered in from another room. That hurt. But it hurt cleanly. Like setting a broken bone. A pain that is part of healing instead of damage. Because at last I was standing on the true thing instead of the comfortable lie. The consequences, when they came, were not dramatic. There was no explosion, no public downfall, no grand apology. Diane and Kevin split the inheritance. Within 18 months, much of it was gone. Kevin's share especially disappeared in all the predictable ways, the ways anyone who knew Kevin could have predicted. There was no one to call. Or rather, there was someone. There had always been Marcus. Kevin did call, more than once. Each time, I said gently that I was not able to help. Without me there to stand in front of it, the natural shape of his own choices finally arrived in his life. He moved in with a girlfriend, then out, then in with a friend, then somewhere I lost track of. I let myself lose track. That was its own kind of grief, and its own kind of relief. Diane and Greg refinanced the house I had helped buy all those years before. I heard third hand that things were tight. Once, Diane called me and circled near a request she never fully named. I could hear how much it cost her to get close to the question. This woman who had always been the one given to. I said gently, "No, I'm not in a position to help." Then I asked how her girls were doing. Really asked. For a few minutes we had an almost human conversation. It was the closest she ever came to acknowledging that the well she had drunk from her whole life had been a person, and that the person had quietly stepped away from the edge. There was no scene where they understood. I need to be honest about that. For years, I privately imagined that scene, the moment they would finally see it all laid out. The money, the care, the loans, the years, the way Renata had been used, the way I had been erased. I imagined the weight landing on them. That moment never came. People who cast you in a role for 40 years do not suddenly recast you because you stop saying your lines. Mostly, they find you confusing, then difficult, then less useful to think about. I am probably the villain in Diane's version now. The brother who turned cold after Mom died. The one who abandoned everyone when they needed him. The one grief changed. I can live with that. I would rather be the villain in a false story than the saint in a true one that was slowly killing me. Renata and I are okay. Better than okay. The money I stopped pouring into other people's emergencies began, slowly and almost shyly, to stay in our own life. At first, it felt strange. A savings account that did not disappear. A weekend that stayed ours. A phone call we did not answer. A bill paid without someone else's crisis standing behind it. A little over a year after the will, after 15 years of scraping and being interrupted and starting over, we finally bought the small house we had always wanted. Nothing grand. A house at the end of a quiet street. A porch. A yard. A tree that was already old when we arrived. The first night we had not unpacked the kitchen, so we sat on the porch steps in the dark with cheap takeout on paper plates balanced on our knees. Renata leaned her head on my shoulder. After a while she said, "Do you realize this is the first thing we have ever bought that was just for us?" She was right. Not for one of them. Not because of one of them. Not to fix anything. Just for us. I put my arm around her. We ate cold takeout off paper plates and watched the evening turn fully dark. A neighbor a few houses down was grilling something, and the smell came down the street. Somewhere, a screen door banged. For the first time I could remember, I was exactly where I was, with no one waiting to need me. I think about my mother more gently now than you might expect. I have stopped needing her to have been someone other than who she was. That took time. I believe she loved me as much as she was able to. Her love simply came to me in the shape of need. She gave the imagining your future kind of love to the children she worried about. Diane, because Diane was the bright one, and therefore had a future worth protecting. Kevin, because Kevin was fragile, and therefore had to be rescued. She gave me the relying on you kind, because I was the strong one, the steady one, the one she never had to worry about, the one who could handle it. In some bent and broken way, maybe that was the closest thing to trust she knew how to give. It does not fix anything. It does not give back the down payment. It does not give back the years. It does not give me my father's tools. But I no longer carry it as an open wound. I carry it as a fact. The will said I was not a beneficiary. And in a sense deeper than my mother intended, it was right. I did not inherit money. What I inherited in that mismatched chair, in the smell of burnt coffee, watching my name fail to appear line after line, was the truth. The whole plain truth. And the truth was worth more than the house, the savings, the jewelry, and the tools combined. Because the moment I knew exactly what I was to them, I was finally free to become something else to myself. You cannot leave a room you do not know you are trapped in. The will showed me the walls, and once I could see the walls, I could find the door. The door had never been locked from their side. It had been locked from mine. People ask whether I miss them. The honest answer is that I miss something, but not them exactly. I miss the family I kept hoping they would become. The family that was always one more sacrifice away. One more rescue away. One more quiet act of goodness away from finally turning to me and seeing me. I grieved that imaginary family harder than I grieved my actual mother, because that imaginary family had been the great hope of my whole life. The will finally killed it. But you cannot grieve forever for something that was never coming. Eventually, the grief thinned. Then it quieted. Then it became relief. The relief of a man who stopped waiting at a station for a train that was never scheduled to arrive. I understood my place in the family the afternoon the lawyer read the will. My place was the empty chair. The one no one sets at the table because the person who does the work is not treated like a guest. So I got up from that chair, quietly, without overturning the table, without raising my voice. I walked out of the burnt coffee room, down the stairs past the nail salon, and into the spring afternoon. Then I went home. And over the next slow year, I built a different table, a smaller one. Only the people at it who had ever once asked how my day was and waited to hear the answer. Most evenings there are 2 chairs. Some evenings there are more. Friends we made slowly. The family you choose when the one you were given has shown you the door. It is enough. It is more than I ever had at the bigger, louder, hungrier table, where there were many chairs and not one of them had ever truly been mine. The strangest and truest thing I can tell you is that I am not angry anymore. For a long time, I thought freedom would feel like victory. It does not. It feels like quiet. A porch in the blue evening. A cup of coffee gone cold because I got too caught up in being content to remember to drink it. A woman across a small table looking at me like I am someone worth providing for. Worth pouring into. Worth keeping. It feels like waking up on a Saturday and knowing no phone will ring at 11 at night with a tremor in the voice. No emergency will land in my lap before breakfast. The money I earn will stay in the life I am living. My days belong to me now, not to the endless needs of people who only called when something was broken. The will left me nothing. Not $1. Not one object. Not one line. Not even my own father's tools. But it gave me the last proof I needed. My name was missing from the page because it had been missing from their idea of family all along. And once I stopped waiting for them to write it there, I finally started writing it somewhere else. On the mailbox of the house Renata and I bought. On the small table where we eat dinner in peace. On the life I no longer hand over piece by piece to people who mistake sacrifice for love. The lawyer read my mother's will, and I finally understood my place in the family. So I left that place, and I have never in my life been richer.